the champagne glass shattered against the marble floor. Every head in the reception hall turned toward me as I held up the bank statement, my daughter's face draining of color while her new husband grabbed for the microphone. I hadn't planned to attend my daughter Emma's wedding. How could I, when no invitation ever arrived? But standing there in that grand venue, the Rosewood Manor with its crystal chandeliers and walls of white roses, watching 200 guests celebrate a marriage I'd unknowingly financed, I couldn't help but think how perfectly the ceremony had been orchestrated. Every detail, from the imported Italian linens to the 7-tier cake, had been selected with precision by the wedding planner. The same planner who'd assured me 6 months ago that the corporate event I was funding through my company would be the social event of the season. The contract I'd signed, the one tucked safely in my purse, listed a summer gala for Morrison Industries. Not my daughter's wedding reception. Not this betrayal dressed in white satin and baby's breath. The groom Marcus, his name was Marcus, stood frozen at the microphone, his prepared speech forgotten. Behind him, the wedding party shifted nervously. Bridesmaids in dusty rose gowns I recognized from the invoice marked evening wear for staff. Even the venue itself, this sprawling estate where my own mother had once dreamed of holding family celebrations, had been secured with my money under false pretenses. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd paid $40,000 to be excluded from my only child's wedding. "Mrs. Morrison?" The voice belonged to Gregory Ashford, the wedding planner who'd been avoiding my calls for 3 weeks. His face had gone pale beneath his careful tan. "I can explain." But I wasn't there for explanations. Not anymore. 3 hours ago, I'd been at home, reviewing quarterly reports, when my assistant had forwarded a social media post. "Isn't this your Emma?" she'd written. The photo showed my daughter in a wedding dress I'd never seen, standing in front of a venue I'd been paying for in installments since January. The caption read, "Finally free to start fresh with my chosen family." Chosen family. As if the woman who'd raised her alone after her father's death, who'd built a company from nothing to give her everything, was something to be discarded. The discovery had been like ice water in my veins. Every payment I'd authorized, every document I'd signed, believing I was investing in a corporate event for my manufacturing business, had been for this. This celebration I wasn't welcome to attend. The cruelty of it was almost artistic, using my money to exclude me from the most important day of my daughter's life. Marcus finally found his voice. "Security," he called out, though his voice cracked on the word. "Please, escort." "The owner," I interrupted, my voice carrying across the hushed reception hall. "Please escort the owner of this event to her table." I pulled the folded contract from my purse, the one with my signature, and more importantly, the venue's legal stamp. Though I suppose I'll need to have one added, since my invitation was mysteriously lost. Emma stepped forward then, her bouquet trembling in her hands. She looked beautiful in her dress, a dress I now realized had been listed on the expense report as textile samples for the summer collection. Her makeup was flawless, probably done by the artist billed to my account as consultant for product photography. Every inch of her wedding had been carved from my flesh, paid for with money I'd earned, building a life for us both. "Mom," the word came out strangled, "you can't be here." "Can't I?" I kept my voice steady, though my hands shook as I unfolded the contract. Strange, since according to this legal document, I'm the host of this event. Every vendor here has been paid by my company, Every flower, every appetizer, every note of music from that string quartet. It's all mine. The wedding planner. Gregory stepped between us, his hands raised as if he could somehow smooth this over with gestures. There's been a misunderstanding, he began, but I cut him off with a look that had silenced boardrooms full of executives. The only misunderstanding, I said, loud enough for the assembled guests to hear, was mine. I believed I was funding a corporate event. I believed the wedding planner my daughter recommended was ethical. I believed... My voice caught, and I had to swallow hard before continuing. I believed my daughter would never be capable of this level of deception. The room had become a tableau. 200 guests frozen in their seats, champagne flutes suspended midway to lips, forks hovering over plates of $60 per head salmon. They'd come to celebrate a union, but they were witnessing something else entirely, the unraveling of a carefully constructed lie. Marcus moved then, placing himself between Emma and me like a shield. He was handsome in that generic way Emma had always favored, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of aggressive confidence that passed for charm in certain circles. I'd met him exactly twice before today, both times brief encounters where Emma had seemed anxious to keep us separated. Now I understood why. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low and threatening. "This is our day, and you're ruining it." "Your day?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to make the nearest guests flinch. "Your day that I paid for? Tell me, Marcus, which part of this wedding did you contribute to? The flowers I bought? The photographer I hired? Or perhaps the honeymoon suite I reserved at the Ritz-Carlton?" His jaw clenched, and I saw his hands ball into fists. Good. Let him show his true colors in front of everyone. Let these guests see what kind of man my daughter had chosen to build her new life with. The kind who would orchestrate a fraud this elaborate, who would poison a daughter against her mother for what money? Pride? Some perceived slight I wasn't even aware of? Emma touched his arm, and he stepped back slightly, though his posture remained aggressive. She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since I'd walked in, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, regret, or just annoyance that I'd discovered her scheme. "We need to talk," she said quietly, "but not here, not like this." "No," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "We'll talk here. These people," I gestured to the assembled crowd, "came to witness a union built on love and trust. They should know what they're really celebrating. A marriage founded on lies and theft." Gregory tried once more to interject. "Perhaps we could move this discussion." "To where?" I turned on him, years of boardroom experience lending steel to my spine. "To the bridal suite I paid for? To the garden terrace I rented? Every square inch of this venue belongs to me until midnight, Mr. Ashford. And you..." I pointed at him, watching him shrink back. "You're complicit in fraud. You knew exactly who was paying for this event. You have my signature on dozens of documents, all listing Morrison Industries as the client. It was Emma's idea," he blurted out, then immediately looked stricken. "I mean, she said you knew. She said you wanted it this way, for tax reasons." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Emma's face had gone from pale to red, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run as tears started falling. But I couldn't afford to be moved by her tears. Not anymore. She'd made her choice when she'd decided to steal from me, rather than simply talk to me. 6 months, I said, addressing the room now, rather than any individual. For 6 months, I've been paying for an event I was never meant to attend. Every meeting with vendors, every tasting, every fitting, all carefully scheduled when I was traveling for business, all hidden behind corporate terminology and fake event names. I pulled out my phone and showed the screen to anyone who cared to look. The bank statements, the transfers, the invoices. Evidence of a betrayal so complete it took my breath away. The wedding photographer, perhaps sensing the historic nature of this moment, had begun taking pictures again, his camera clicking softly in the silence. "Mom, please," Emma said, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. Marcus's family. They said..." "What?" I waited, genuinely curious what excuse she could possibly offer. What did they say that justified stealing $250,000 from your mother? The number made the crowd gasp. $250,000. For a wedding. For an event I wasn't invited to attend. Marcus's parents, seated at what would have been the head table, stood up. His mother, Patricia, was exactly what I'd expected. Old money pretensions wrapped in new money insecurity. Designer clothes that didn't quite fit. Jewelry that tried too hard to impress. His father, Richard, had the soft look of a man who'd inherited rather than earned, who'd spent his life managing decline rather than building growth. "This is inappropriate," Patricia announced, as if she had any standing here. "Whatever family drama you have should be handled privately." "Family drama?" I turned to her, and something in my expression made her step back. "Is that what you call fraud in your family? Drama?" "We didn't know," Richard said quickly, shooting a look at his son. "Marcus told us Emma's mother was contributing, but we assumed." "You assumed she knew," I finished for him. "You assumed no one would be cruel enough to use a mother's money to exclude her from her daughter's wedding. You assumed wrong." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 guests sat frozen, witnesses to something they'd never expected when they'd RSVP'd to this event. The string quartet had stopped playing, their instruments held awkwardly as they waited for someone to tell them what to do. The catering staff huddled near the kitchen doors, trays of appetizers growing cold in their hands. It was Emma who broke the silence, her voice small and desperate. "Can we please just talk in private? Please, Mom?" I wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to continue this public decimation, to let everyone see exactly what my daughter and her new husband had done. But looking at her, at the tears streaming down her face, at the bouquet shaking in her hands, I felt the first crack in my armor. This was still my daughter, the little girl I'd raised alone, who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. 5 minutes, I said. "You have 5 minutes to explain why you did this." Marcus started to follow as Emma moved toward me, but I held up my hand. "Not you. You've done enough." "He's my husband," Emma protested, and the word was like a knife between my ribs. Husband. She'd gained a husband and lost a mother, all in one elaborate deception. "He's your co-conspirator," I corrected, "and if he has any sense, he'll stay out of this conversation." We moved to the side of the reception hall, near the French doors that opened onto the garden. I could see the ceremony space beyond, chairs still arranged in perfect rows, the arch where they'd exchanged vows still decorated with white roses and baby's breath. Had she thought of me at all when she walked down that aisle alone? Had she wondered what it would have been like to have her mother there? "Marcus's mother," Emma began, then stopped, taking a shaky breath. She said you wouldn't fit in, that you were too working class, that the guests would be uncomfortable. Working class? I almost laughed. I own a company worth $30 million. I employ 200 people. I've been featured in Forbes. What exactly about me is too working class for Patricia Henderson? Emma flinched at my use of her mother-in-law's maiden name. A small dig, but one that hit its mark. I'd done my research on the Hendersons. Old family, new money problems. Richard's family had been wealthy once, 3 generations ago. But poor investments and expensive tastes had whittled their fortune down to almost nothing. They lived on reputation now, trading the family name for credit they couldn't afford to repay. It's not about money, Emma said, though she couldn't meet my eyes. It's about breeding, class, the way you talk, the way you dress. Patricia said you'd embarrass me. Each word was a separate wound, carefully placed. I looked down at my clothes, a simple but elegant pantsuit I'd bought specifically for the corporate event I thought I was attending later this week. It had cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, but apparently it wasn't enough for Patricia Henderson's standards. So you decided to take my money but not invite me, I said slowly, making sure I understood. You decided I was good enough to pay for your wedding, but not good enough to attend it. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Emma insisted. The wedding was going to be small, family only. But then Marcus's parents wanted to invite their friends, and it grew. And the costs, God, Mom, the costs just kept climbing. Patricia knew about your company's summer gala fund, and she suggested you commit fraud, I interrupted. She suggested you lie to me, steal from me, and cut me out of your life. And you agreed. Emma was crying harder now, her mascara running in dark streams down her cheeks. The makeup artist would be horrified, all that careful work ruined. Though I supposed it didn't matter now. The photos were already ruined. The whole day was ruined. Good. I was going to tell you, she said. After. I was going to explain everything and pay you back. With what money? I asked. Marcus's family is broke, Emma. Did you know that? They're leveraged to their eyeballs, living off credit cards and home equity loans. The only reason they could contribute anything to this wedding was because they took out another loan against their house. Your new in-laws are 3 months away from bankruptcy. The color drained from her face completely. That's not true. They have money. They have the estate in Connecticut, the house in the Hamptons. All mortgaged, I said. All one missed payment away from foreclosure. I had them investigated the moment you started dating Marcus seriously. I wanted to make sure he wasn't after you for your trust fund. I laughed bitterly. I never imagined you'd be the one after my money. Through the French doors, I could see the reception continuing in an awkward fashion. Marcus was talking animatedly with his parents, probably trying to figure out damage control. Gregory, the wedding planner, was on his phone, likely calling his lawyer. The guests were starting to leave, gathering their things with the embarrassed haste of people who'd witnessed something they wished they hadn't. Your trust fund, I said suddenly, a thought occurring to me. You get access when you turn 30 or when you marry, whichever comes first. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You needed to get married to access the money, but you also needed my money to have the wedding Patricia demanded. Emma's silence was answer enough. How much did she promise you? I asked. What was the deal? You get your trust fund, pay for their debts, and in exchange, they accept you into their precious family? Was cutting me out part of the bargain? Or was that just a bonus? You don't understand, Emma said desperately. You've never understood. You think money fixes everything, that success is all that matters. But there are things money can't buy: acceptance, belonging, history. History, I repeated flatly. You threw away 28 years of history with me for 6 months with people who see you as a bank account. That's not... She stopped, her protestation dying as Marcus appeared beside her. He'd approached despite my warning, his face set in hard lines. We're leaving, he announced, grabbing Emma's arm. The reception is ruined anyway. We'll go to the hotel, and we'll deal with this tomorrow. The hotel I paid for? I asked mildly. I don't think so. In fact, I pulled out my phone and made a quick call. Angela? Yes, it's Claire Morrison. I need you to cancel the reservation at the Ritz-Carlton, the honeymoon suite, and the block of rooms. Yes, immediately. Full cancellation. I'll handle any fees. Marcus's face went from red to purple. You can't do that. I can, and I just did. I turned back to Emma. Your 5 minutes are up. You've made your choice clear. You chose them over me. You chose their approval over my love. You chose their bankruptcy over my success. Mom. I'm not your mother anymore, I said, and the words came out steadier than I expected. You made that decision when you planned this elaborate deception. When you looked me in the eye for 6 months and lied. When you took my money and used it to exclude me from your life. I turned to leave, but Emma grabbed my arm. Wait, please. The trust fund. I need you to sign the release papers. I can't access it without your signature as the trustee. I stared at her, genuinely amazed. Even now, even after everything that had been revealed, she was still thinking about the money. My money, always my money. No, I said simply. You can't do that, Marcus interjected, his facade finally cracking completely. That money is Emma's. You have no right. I have every right, I interrupted. As trustee, I have complete discretion over when and how to release the funds. The terms are clear, marriage, or age 30, subject to the trustee's approval. I do not approve. We'll sue, he threatened. With what money? I asked. Your family's maxed out credit cards? Emma's savings account with $3,000 in it? By all means, try. My lawyers will be happy to bill me $500 an hour to destroy you. The reception hall was nearly empty now. Just the catering staff and a few lingering guests pretending not to watch our family drama unfold. The beautiful venue felt like a mausoleum. All those flowers and decorations serving as funeral arrangements for a relationship that had died today. Patricia Henderson approached then, her husband trailing behind her like a well-trained dog. She held herself with the kind of rigid posture that spoke of too many years trying to maintain appearances that no longer matched reality. Mrs. Morrison, she began, her tone condescending despite the circumstances. Surely we can resolve this as civilized people. Emma and Marcus are married now. They're family, and family supports. Family, I interrupted, doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't use love as a weapon and money as a bandage. I looked at Emma one last time. But then again, you're not my family anymore. You're theirs now. I hope they're worth it. I left the reception hall with my head high, though my legs felt like water beneath me. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's shrill voice trying to rally the remaining guests, Marcus's angry growl as he berated Emma, and above it all, my daughter's broken sobs. Each sound was a wound, but I kept walking. In the parking lot, I found my car among the luxury vehicles and wedding party limousines, looking oddly ordinary in its sensible sedan practicality. My hands shook as I tried to get the key in the ignition. 28 years of motherhood ended in an afternoon. 28 years of sacrifice, love, and devotion traded for the approval of people who would discard her the moment the money ran out. The engine started, and I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. Angela, my assistant. The hotel cancellation is complete. They're asking about the charges to the Morrison Industries account for the wedding venue. What should I tell them? Document everything, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Every charge, every invoice, every communication. We're going to need it all. Are you okay, Claire? Was I okay? My daughter had just revealed herself as someone I didn't recognize. Someone capable of deception on a scale I couldn't have imagined. Someone who valued the approval of strangers over the love of her mother. I will be, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The drive home was a blur. Muscle memory navigated the familiar streets, while my mind replayed every interaction with Emma over the past 6 months. All the time she'd seemed distant or distracted. The way she'd steered conversations away from her wedding plans, claiming she wanted to keep things simple and private. The carefully orchestrated business trips that had kept me away during key planning sessions. She'd played me perfectly, using my trust in her against me. My house felt different when I walked in. Emptier somehow, though nothing had physically changed. The photos of Emma still lined the mantel her graduation, her first day of school, the two of us on various vacations over the years. Happy memories that now felt like lies. Had she ever really loved me? Or had I always just been a resource to be managed and exploited? I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed to qualify, though not in the way I'd imagined. The wine tasted like ash in my mouth, but I drank it anyway, needing something to dull the edge of the pain. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Morrison? This is Jonathan Winters from the Herald. We received a tip about an incident at the Rosewood Manor this afternoon. Would you care to comment? I hung up without responding. Of course. 200 guests with smartphones, and someone had decided to make my humiliation public. By tomorrow, the story would be everywhere. Successful businesswoman crashes daughter's wedding. They'd paint me as the villain, the bitter mother who couldn't let go. No one would care about the theft, the deception, the months of calculated lies. The doorbell rang. I ignored it. Then came the knocking, persistent and demanding. Claire, open the door. We need to talk. Patricia Henderson. Because this day hadn't been horrible enough. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She stood there with Richard, both of them looking like they'd swallowed something unpleasant. Behind them, I could see Marcus's Tesla in my driveway. They'd come in force. We need to discuss the trust fund, Patricia said without preamble. This emotional reaction is understandable, but you can't legally withhold Emma's inheritance out of spite. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Let them enter my domain. Let them see how the working class lived. They walked into my home with the kind of careful steps people use in museums, as if they might break something or catch something. My living room, comfortable, lived in, full of books and family photos, seemed to offend Patricia's sensibilities. She perched on the edge of my sofa, like it might stain her designer dress. "The trust fund," she began again, but I cut her off, "is structured very specifically. Would you like to see the documents?" I pulled out my laptop and brought up the files. Years ago, when I'd set up the trust, my lawyer had insisted on ironclad language. "You never know," she'd said. "Family money does strange things to people." How right she'd been. "The trustee, that's me, has sole discretion over the disbursement of funds upon marriage," I read. "The trustee must be satisfied that the marriage is entered into in good faith, without coercion or undue influence, and that the funds will be used in a manner consistent with the beneficiary's best interests." "She married my son willingly," Richard protested. "There's no coercion." "Isn't there?" I asked. "Your son and your wife convinced my daughter to defraud me. They convinced her to trade her relationship with her mother for your approval. They manipulated a vulnerable young woman who desperately wanted to belong, and they used that desperation to gain access to her money. If that's not undue influence, what is?" Patricia's face had gone pale under her carefully applied makeup. "You can't prove any of that." "Can't I?" I smiled, and it felt sharp. "I have 6 months of documentation showing how this wedding was planned and paid for. I have emails from Gregory Ashford discussing the situation with Emma's mother. I have text messages Emma sent to friends about keeping me in the dark. Would you like me to continue?" "This is extortion," Marcus said from the doorway. He'd been listening from the hall, too cowardly to face me directly. "No," I corrected. "Extortion would be threatening to expose your family's financial situation, unless you did what I wanted. I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply exercising my legal rights as trustee. Emma's trust fund remains under my control until I decide otherwise. When she turns 30, Patricia started. "Subject to the trustee's approval," I finished. "The same clause applies. I have complete discretion until she's 35, at which point the funds transfer automatically. 7 more years. Think your creditors will wait that long?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 7 years without access to the money they'd been counting on. 7 years of mounting debt and diminishing assets. 7 years of watching their carefully maintained facade crumble. "There must be something we can work out," Richard said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "Some arrangement. After all, we're family now." "No," I said firmly. "We're not family. Emma made that clear when she chose you over me. She's your problem now. Your debt-riddled, morally bankrupt problem." Patricia stood abruptly. "You're a vindictive bitch." "Perhaps," I agreed. "But I'm a vindictive bitch with $30 million and no daughter to leave it to. I suppose I'll have to find other uses for my money. Charities, perhaps. Or maybe I'll establish a scholarship fund for young women who've been manipulated by their in-laws. I'll call it the Patricia Henderson Memorial Fund for Toxic Families." Marcus stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you've won? You've lost your daughter. You'll die alone, and no one will care." The words were meant to wound, and they did. But I'd been wounded so much today that one more cut barely registered. "Maybe," I said. "But I'll die alone with my dignity intact, which is more than your family can say. Now get out of my house." They left in a flurry of threats and recriminations, promising lawyers and lawsuits and public humiliation. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and locked it. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Final. Empty. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop again. There were emails already, from vendors, from guests, from reporters. The story was spreading. By tomorrow, everyone would know what had happened at the Rosewood Manor. But there was one email that caught my attention. From Gregory Ashford, the wedding planner. Mrs. Morrison, I know you have no reason to trust me, but there's something you need to know. Something about the contracts and the real reason for this deception. Can we meet? I have documents you'll want to see. I met Gregory at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. The place was nearly empty, just a few early risers, hunched over laptops and coffee cups, the kind of people who used cafes as offices. Gregory had chosen a corner booth, away from the windows, away from potential witnesses. He looked haggard, his usual polished appearance replaced by wrinkled clothes and shadows under his eyes. He had a manila folder with him, thick with papers that seemed to weigh down not just the table, but the very air around us. The coffee shop felt too normal for this conversation. People were living their ordinary lives, worried about ordinary things, work deadlines, lunch plans, weekend activities. Meanwhile, I was about to learn the full scope of how my daughter's life had been orchestrated by criminals. The normalcy of it all made everything feel surreal, like I was watching someone else's life from the outside. Before we start, he said, not meeting my eyes, I need you to know I thought you knew. At first, Emma told me you were aware of everything, that this was all for tax purposes, keeping personal and business expenses separate. When did you realize she was lying? I asked, my voice neutral. I'd spent the sleepless night cycling between rage and devastation. But this morning I felt strangely empty, like a house after the movers had come. About 3 months in, you called to confirm a detail about the catering, and you kept referring to it as a corporate event. The way you talked. I knew something was wrong. But by then, I was in too deep. The Hendersons. He paused, choosing his words carefully. They made it clear that if I didn't continue with the arrangement, they'd ruin my reputation. They have connections, old families who use my services. One word from Patricia, and my business would be finished. So you chose your business over basic decency? I observed. Yes, he admitted. I did, and I've regretted it every day since. He pushed the folder across the table. But maybe this will help make things right. I opened the folder and found a stack of documents, contracts, emails, bank statements. But these weren't the ones I'd seen before. These were different accounts, different names. What am I looking at? The Hendersons have been planning this for 2 years, Gregory said, long before Emma even met Marcus. They've done this before, 3 times actually. They find wealthy families with daughters, introduce their son, orchestrate the romance, and then extract as much money as possible before moving on. I stared at the papers, trying to process what he was telling me. Are you saying my daughter's marriage is a con? I'm saying the Hendersons are professional grifters with a very specific method. They target families like yours, new money, single parents, daughters who feel like outsiders. Patricia studies them, learns their weaknesses. She knew Emma felt insecure about not fitting into old money society. She knew you'd do anything to make your daughter happy. She played both of you perfectly. The coffee shop noise faded as I examined the documents. 3 other families, 3 other weddings, 3 other trust funds that had been drained within months of the marriage. In each case, Marcus had divorced his bride within 2 years, claiming irreconcilable differences, and walked away with a substantial settlement. "Does Emma know?" I asked, though I wasn't sure which answer I wanted to hear. "I don't think so. At least, she didn't at first. Patricia is very good at manipulation. She probably convinced Emma that cutting you out was her own idea, that it was the only way to be accepted. By the time Emma might have had doubts, she was in too deep to back out." I thought about my daughter's tears yesterday, the genuine shock on her face when I'd revealed the Hendersons' financial situation. Maybe she had been a victim too. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that, because the alternative, that my daughter was complicit in this from the beginning, was too painful to accept. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "Because what they did to you was wrong, and because—" He pulled out another document. "They're planning to leave the country next week. They've already transferred most of their liquid assets offshore. Once they get Emma's trust fund, they'll disappear. And Marcus will file for divorce from wherever they end up, claiming abandonment. Emma will be left with nothing. No money, no family, no support system. They've isolated her from you, and once they have what they want, they'll discard her." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just stolen my money or my daughter. They'd orchestrated the complete destruction of our relationship to ensure Emma would have nowhere to turn when they betrayed her. "I need proof," I said. "Real evidence, not just suspicions." "Check Emma's prenuptial agreement," Gregory suggested. Patricia insisted on one, supposedly to protect Marcus's family assets. "But look at the clauses about trust funds and inherited wealth. I bet you'll find some interesting language." He stood to leave, then paused. "I'm testifying against them. The Kirkwood family, their last victims, they're pressing charges. Fraud, emotional distress, theft by deception. My testimony could put the Hendersons away for years. But I wanted you to know first. You still have time to protect Emma, even if she doesn't deserve it." After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, staring at the documents. 3 families destroyed, 3 daughters left broken and bankrupt. And now Emma was number 4. I called my lawyer. "Sarah, I need you to pull all the documents related to Emma's trust fund. And I need you to find out everything you can about a prenuptial agreement between Emma Morrison and Marcus Henderson. Yes, today. I don't care what it costs." By afternoon, I had my answer. The prenup was a masterpiece of manipulation. On the surface, it looked like standard protection for both parties. But buried in subsections and addendums was language that would give Marcus claim to any inherited wealth Emma received during the marriage. If the trust fund was released, he'd be entitled to 60% in the event of a divorce. If Emma contested it, she'd lose everything. My daughter had signed away her future without even knowing it. I thought about letting it happen, about letting her learn this lesson the hard way. She'd chosen them over me, after all. She'd participated in the deception, even if she hadn't orchestrated it. Part of me wanted her to experience the consequences of her choices. But she was still my daughter. The little girl who'd made me Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts and misspelled words. The teenager who'd cried in my arms over broken friendships and failed tests. The young woman who'd graduated college with honors, who'd once told me I was her hero. I couldn't save her from the emotional consequences of what she'd done, but I could save her from financial ruin. I made another call. "Angela, I need you to set up a meeting with the federal prosecutor's office. Tell them I have information about an interstate fraud scheme. And then call Channel 7. Tell them Claire Morrison is ready to give an exclusive interview about what really happened at yesterday's wedding. If the Hendersons wanted to play games, they'd chosen the wrong opponent. I'd built my company from nothing, fought my way through a male-dominated industry, and raised a daughter alone after my husband's death. I'd been underestimated my entire life. It was a mistake the Hendersons were about to regret. My phone buzzed. Emma? Mom, please, we need to talk. Marcus's parents are acting strange. They're packing things, talking about a trip. Something's wrong. I'm scared. For the first time since yesterday, I heard my daughter in that text. Not the stranger who'd betrayed me, but the girl who still called me when she was frightened. Come home, I texted back. Come alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. An hour later, I heard her key in the lock. She still had her key. She looked terrible. Her honeymoon glow replaced by puffy eyes and blotchy skin. She'd been crying for hours. Mom, she started, but I held up my hand. Sit down. Don't talk. Just listen. I showed her everything. Gregory's documents, the evidence of the previous victims, the prenuptial agreement she'd signed, her husband's family's real financial situation, the plan to leave the country. By the time I finished, she was white as paper, her hands shaking. This can't be real, she whispered. Marcus loves me. He wouldn't. Call him, I suggested. Tell him you've convinced me to release the trust fund. See how quickly he wants to meet with lawyers to transfer the money. She made the call on speaker. I watched her face crumble as Marcus's voice, warm and loving, immediately pivoted to discussing transfer procedures and account numbers. He didn't ask how she'd convinced me. He didn't care about the rift between us. He just wanted to know how quickly they could access the funds. When she hung up, she was sobbing. I'm so sorry. Mom, I'm so sorry. I ruined everything for nothing. For people who don't even care about me. I wanted to comfort her, to pull her into my arms and tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Instead, I sat across from her, the kitchen table between us like a fortress wall. The FBI will be here in an hour, I said. You're going to tell them everything. Every conversation with Patricia about the wedding, every document you signed, every lie they told you. And then you're going to file for annulment. Annulment? Emma looked confused through her tears. But we're married. It's been consummated. Fraud, I interrupted. Marriage entered into under fraudulent circumstances can be annulled. Marcus married you for your money, not for love. His family orchestrated the entire relationship to gain access to your trust fund. That's grounds for annulment in this state. But I loved him, she said, and the past tense was telling. I thought he loved me. Maybe he did, in his way. Or maybe he's just a very good actor who learned from masters. Either way, the marriage is over. The FBI agents arrived precisely on time. 2 serious-looking people, in dark suits, who set up recording equipment on my dining room table. Emma told them everything, her voice growing stronger as the story unfolded. The agents exchanged glances when she described certain details. Apparently, the Hendersons' pattern was already familiar to them. We've been building a case, Agent Martinez explained. Your testimony, combined with Mr. Ashford's and the evidence from the previous victims, should be enough for arrests. But we need to move quickly. Our intelligence suggests they're planning to leave the country within 48 hours. They have a private plane scheduled, Agent Coleman added. Officially, it's logged as a vacation to the Bahamas. But the Bahamas doesn't have an extradition treaty for fraud cases under a certain dollar amount. After they left, Emma and I sat in silence. The house felt different with her in it, fuller, but also more fragile, like a cracked vase that might shatter if handled roughly. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you face the consequences," I said. "The legal ones will be handled by the FBI and the courts. But the personal ones, those are yours to bear. Do you hate me?" Her voice was small, childlike. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I love who you were. I don't know who you are now. The daughter I raised wouldn't have been capable of this cruelty. So either I never really knew you, or you've become someone I don't recognize." "Patricia said," she began, then stopped. "No, that's not fair. I can't blame everything on her. I made choices. I chose to lie to you. I chose to exclude you. I chose them over you." She took a shuddering breath. "I think I wanted to punish you." "For what?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "For being so strong, so successful, so sure of yourself. You never needed anyone, never showed weakness. You built this amazing life from nothing. And I couldn't live up to it. I wasn't smart enough to build a business. I wasn't strong enough to stand on my own. I wasn't enough." The words hung between us, years of unspoken resentment finally given voice. I'd thought I was showing her that women could be anything, do anything. Instead, I'd made her feel like she could never measure up. "So you decided to hurt me," I said. "I decided to be someone else, someone who belonged in Patricia's world, someone who came from the right family, went to the right schools, knew the right people, someone whose mother wasn't a reminder of where I really came from." "And how did that work out?" I asked, and the bitterness in my voice surprised us both. "I lost everything," she whispered. "I lost you. I lost myself. And I'm about to lose him too, aren't I? When they arrest his parents, when they freeze the accounts, when they realize there's no money coming, he'll leave." "Yes," I said simply. "He will." My phone rang. Angela. "Claire, turn on channel 7. Now." I grabbed the remote and found the channel. The breaking news banner read, "Prominent family arrested in multi-state fraud scheme." The footage showed FBI agents leading Patricia and Richard Henderson out of their mansion in handcuffs. Patricia was screaming about lawyers and connections, her careful composure completely shattered. Richard looked defeated, his shoulders slumped, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. Marcus Henderson, son of the accused, could not be reached for comment, the reporter said. Sources indicate he may also face charges related to the alleged marriage fraud scheme that targeted wealthy families across 3 states. Emma's phone started ringing immediately. Marcus, no doubt, looking for explanation or support, or possibly someone to blame. She didn't answer. "He'll come here," she said. "When he can't reach me, he'll come here." "Let him," I said. "The FBI is watching the house. If he shows up, they'll arrest him." We didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, Marcus's Tesla screeched into the driveway. He pounded on the door, shouting Emma's name, demanding she come out and explain what she'd done. The fear in his voice was palpable. The golden boy had just realized his parents' house of cards had collapsed, and he was trapped in the rubble. "Emma, I know you're in there. This is your fault. You couldn't just keep your mouth shut. You had to ruin everything." The FBI agents materialized from wherever they'd been watching, approaching Marcus with careful precision. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They had him on the ground and in handcuffs within seconds. "Emma!" he screamed as they led him away. "You bitch! You destroyed my family! I never loved you! You were just a mark! Just another stupid girl with money!" Emma flinched at each word, but she didn't cry. Perhaps she'd run out of tears, or perhaps hearing him confirm what she'd already suspected was almost a relief. The fairy tale was definitely over. Prince Charming had revealed himself as the villain. "At least he was honest at the end," she said quietly. The house fell silent again. Outside, the FBI vehicles pulled away, taking Marcus to wherever they were holding his parents. Tomorrow, the story would be everywhere. The wedding disaster would be revealed as something even worse, a calculated con that had destroyed multiple families. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be completely honest. When you walked down that aisle yesterday, when you stood at that altar, knowing I wasn't there, knowing you'd paid for it all with my money, what were you thinking?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I was thinking about you," she admitted. "I kept looking at the empty seat where you should have been. Patricia had said I wouldn't miss you, that I'd be too happy to care. But all I could think was that my mother wasn't there to see me get married. And then I pushed it down because it was too late to change anything." "It's never too late," I said. "You could have stopped it at any moment. You could have told the truth." "I was a coward," she said simply. "I'm still a coward. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be your daughter again after what I've done." "I don't know either," I admitted. "Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, even if you put it back together, you can still see the cracks. So we're done? You're done with me?" I thought about it, really considered saying yes. It would be easier, cleaner. I could walk away from this mess, from the daughter who'd betrayed me, and start fresh. I had my business, my money, my life. I didn't need her, but that was a lie. I'd built everything for her. Every late night at the office, every difficult decision, every sacrifice. It had all been for Emma, for the future I wanted to give her. And now that future was in ruins, destroyed by her own choices and the manipulation of criminals. "I don't know," I said finally. "I honestly don't know if we can come back from this, but I know you're going to need help getting through what's coming. The investigation, the trials, the annulment, it's going to be brutal. The media will crucify you. Marcus's friends will blame you for his family's downfall. You're going to be very alone." "I deserve it," she said. "Maybe," I agreed. But deserving something and surviving it are two different things. The next 6 months were exactly as brutal as I'd predicted. The trial made national news. The wedding scammers became a true crime sensation. Emma testified against the Hendersons, detailing how Patricia had groomed her, isolated her from me, and convinced her that deceiving her mother was the only way to be accepted into their social circle. The prosecution painted her as a victim. The defense painted her as a co-conspirator. The media painted her as a cautionary tale about greed and family betrayal. Marcus tried to claim ignorance, insisting he knew nothing about his parents' scheme. But the FBI had found text messages between him and previous victims, coaching them on how to convince their parents to release trust funds early. He'd done this before. Emma wasn't special. She was just the most profitable mark they'd found. The Hendersons were convicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and theft by deception. Patricia got 12 years. Richard got 10, Marcus got 7, with possibility of parole in 4. Their assets were seized to pay restitution to their victims. The estate in Connecticut, the house in the Hamptons, all of it was liquidated. Emma moved back home, not into her old room, but into the guest suite above the garage. We were living in the same property, but separate lives, orbiting each other like binary stars that could no longer touch without destroying each other. She got a job at a non-profit, something Patricia would have sneered at. She saw a therapist twice a week. She didn't ask about the trust fund, and I didn't offer information. The annulment was granted quickly once the criminal convictions came through. Emma Morrison Henderson became Emma Morrison again, as if the marriage had never happened. But we both knew it had. The scars were invisible, but permanent. We didn't eat meals together. We didn't talk beyond basic logistics. I'd pass her in the kitchen, and we'd nod like polite strangers. She'd leave rent money on the counter, though I never asked for it. It went into an account I didn't touch. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I also couldn't bring myself to profit from her pain. One night, about 3 months after the trial ended, I heard her crying through the walls. Not the dramatic sobs of immediate grief, but the quiet, exhausted tears of someone who'd run out of hope. I stood outside her door for a long time, hand raised to knock, but I couldn't do it. The gap between us was too wide. I didn't know how to bridge it, or if I even wanted to. Gregory Ashford sent me a letter. His business had survived, barely. He'd rebranded, moved to a different state, started over. He thanked me for not destroying him completely when I could have. He said he thought about Emma often, hoped she was recovering. He included a check partial repayment for his role in the deception. I tore it up. I didn't want his money. I had plenty of money. What I'd lost couldn't be bought back. 6 months to the day after the wedding, I came home to find Emma in the living room, surrounded by photo albums. Our family history spread across the coffee table. Birthdays, vacations, graduations. All those moments when we'd been happy, before everything went wrong. I was trying to remember, she said without looking up. Trying to find the moment when I became someone who could do what I did. But I can't find it. In all these pictures, I just see a girl who loved her mother, who was loved by her mother. How did I become someone else? People aren't photographs, I said. We're not frozen moments. We're every choice we make, and you made some terrible ones. I know. She finally looked at me, and I was struck by how much older she looked. The past 6 months had aged her years. I keep thinking about what you said, that trust is like a mirror, that even if you put it back together, you can see the cracks. I remember. But maybe that's okay, she continued. Maybe the cracks remind us to be more careful. Maybe they make us appreciate what we have, instead of taking it for granted. Pretty words, I said, but words are easy. You were full of words for 6 months while you planned that wedding. Words about being busy, about keeping things simple, about wanting to surprise me. All lies. Yes, she agreed. They were. But these aren't. I know I can't undo what I did. I know you may never forgive me. But I want you to know that losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Worse than the humiliation. Worse than the trial. Worse than discovering my marriage was a sham. Losing my mother broke me in ways I'm still discovering. You didn't lose me, I said. You threw me away. Yes, she said again. I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. We stood there, surrounded by the evidence of happier times, 2 women who'd once been everything to each other, and were now barely strangers. "The trust fund," I said suddenly. "I'm restructuring it." Her face went carefully blank. "Okay." "It will still be yours, but differently. Annual disbursements, starting when you're 35, spread over 20 years. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to attract predators. The principal will be protected. Can't be touched by anyone but you. Can't be claimed in a divorce or lawsuit. It'll be waiting for you, but you'll have to build your own life first." That's generous. More than I deserve. "It's practical," I corrected. "I built that money for you. It would be foolish to let one terrible decision negate 28 years of planning. But you'll have to earn it by becoming someone who can handle it responsibly." "And us?" she asked. "What happens to us?" I'd been thinking about that for 6 months. Could we rebuild? Did I want to? The mother in me said, yes, this was my child, my only family. The woman in me said, no, this was someone who'd betrayed me in the cruelest possible way. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe we start small. Coffee once a week. See if we can sit across from each other without the weight of what happened crushing us. See if there's anything left to salvage." "I'd like that," she said quietly. We had coffee that Thursday. It was awkward, stilted, full of long silences. We talked about safe things, her job, the weather, a book she was reading. We didn't talk about the wedding, the trial, or Marcus. We didn't talk about love, or trust, or forgiveness. We just sat across from each other, 2 wounded people trying to remember how to be mother and daughter. It wasn't enough. It might never be enough. But it was something. The Hendersons were in federal prison. Marcus had tried to call Emma from jail, but she'd changed her number. Their victims had received partial restitution from the seized assets, not enough to make them whole, but enough for some justice. The story had become a cautionary tale, discussed in true crime podcasts and documentary specials. We were famous for all the wrong reasons, but fame fades. Scandals are replaced by new scandals. Eventually, people stopped recognizing us in grocery stores, stopped whispering when we walked by. We became ordinary again, just 2 women trying to rebuild something that had been shattered. I still had my company. I still had my money. I still had my dignity, though it had been battered. What I didn't have was my daughter. Not really. The Emma I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone I was still learning to know. Someone who'd been capable of cruelty, but also of courage when she testified. Someone who'd been weak, but was trying to be strong. Someone who'd chosen wrong, but was trying to choose better. The trust fund documents sat in my safe, restructured as promised. Safeguards in place to protect her from herself and others. It would be there when she was ready, when she'd proved she could handle it. When she'd become someone who valued more than money and status. That night, after our first coffee, I found myself looking at the wedding photos someone had posted online. All those guests in their finery, unaware they were attending a crime scene. Emma in her white dress, Marcus in his tuxedo, both of them playing roles in a story that was about to explode. And me, absent from every frame, the ghost at the feast, whose money had paid for everything. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of wine. Not the good stuff this time, just something to take the edge off. Tomorrow, Emma and I would continue our separate lives under the same roof. Next Thursday, we'd have coffee again. Maybe we'd find more to say. maybe we'd find our way back to each other. Maybe we'd discover that some betrayals are too deep to heal. But tonight, I sat alone in my beautiful house, successful and wealthy, and utterly hollowed out. I'd won the battle, exposed the criminals, protected my assets, maintained my dignity. But I'd lost the war. I'd lost my daughter to people who'd seen her as nothing more than a bank account. And even though she'd come back, she'd never really be mine again. The wedding that I'd paid for, but couldn't attend, had ended everything. Not just Emma's marriage, but our relationship as I'd known it. We were strangers now, connected by blood and history, but separated by choices that couldn't be undone. I raised my glass to the empty room. To the mother of the bride, I said to no one. The one who paid for everything and got nothing in return. The silence that answered was absolute. Thank you for staying with me through this. Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones where nobody really wins.